love that song. Such a powerful message. My life story. He's been so good. Oh, my vocabulary just falls so short. I want to speak it into the heavens, and it feels like it just goes like that. It's so insufficient for how good he's been to me. God bless you. You may be seated. Or thank you, praise team, music team. So glad Bishop and Mother Lashley could make it. You know, the New Testament is full of instruction, admonishing us to give honor to others. Romans 3:17 tells us to give honor to whom honor is due. 1 Peter 2:7 says to give honor to all men. And then 1 Timothy 5:17 says specifically to let the elders that rule well or that guide the affairs of the church well be counted worthy of double honor. And then he adds this, especially they who labor, preaching and teaching the word and doctrine. This past Saturday, Bishop turned 80 years old. One of our good friends, Bishop Tom Suey, has always referred to this elite segment of the populace as octogenarians. I can't hardly remember a service, one of our men's ministry, retreats, that he didn't use that somewhere in that. I believe he must have just had a soft spot in his heart for the elderly. But this past Saturday, he turned 80, and this coming June will mark the 57th year since he and Mother Lashley came to pastor this church way back in 1966. And many sitting in this room tonight, plus an unknown multitude beyond these walls, would not be serving the Lord today were it not for Bishop's ministry. So, in keeping with the scriptures, to give honor to whom honor is due and double honor to those who labor in the Lord, we've set aside this service to give honor and perhaps double honor to our bishop. And since at the marriage altar these two became one, Mother Lashley has also contributed much and shares in this time of honor alongside Bishop. I'd like to invite them, if they would, to come and sit here in these seats of special honor, just because I didn't want you to crane your necks or be ignoring the people who are going to share tonight. We're just going to do things a little bit different. This is just pretend like you're in the family room. And if you don't know what it's like to be in the family room, well, just take your cue from somebody close to you. It's story time. It's family time. And we're just going to enjoy some time together. We're going to have some testimonies from a select few of you. We're going to watch a video picture montage of Bishop through the years. And I want to share a moving story with you about the power of one to make a difference. And then finally, we're going to celebrate with cake and refreshments in the fellowship hall. So without further ado, we're going to start. Sister Kit Murnick, one of my favorite people in the world, is going to share a testimony with you just about what Bishop has meant to her through the years.
Oh my. I don't know if I can do this in 5 minutes. I'm going to talk really fast. But we're not just friends, we're family. And he adopted us. He raised us. In fact, John and I were talking the other day. I was complimenting on a message he gave. And I said, you know, you reminded me so much of Bishop. He said, he raised me. And it's like, you know what? He raised me too. They did. And it's no wonder God led me to this church. I'd have never made it anywhere else. And Bishop, you had a photographic memory, knew all the scriptures. There was never a question I could ask you. And it was constant, full of questions. And he taught Vic and I a 10-week Bible study that took 50 weeks. But we developed a friendship and a close bond. And I remember you cutting grass in your suits. And then he graduated to overhauls over those suits. And he was instant in season. That's what that was about. And Mother Lashley, you pushed him. I remember that. She was wanting him to get out there and visit. And she said, we got to get some more people. And they were just always busy teaching Bible studies, reaching for people. And I know that we've put them through a lot of grief. I know we've put him through a lot of grief. And I remember this one time. He's even kind when he chews you out. And he said, you are talking like a foolish woman. And it's like, I was talking like one. He wasn't calling me one, okay? So he was being kind. I remember when church was Wednesday, Sunday morning, Sunday night, and then it was Tuesday, Thursday, Sunday morning, Sunday night. And revivals, 6 nights a week, 3-4 weeks at a time. And he was open to any ministry that he thought would better, would grow, would strengthen this church. I remember ministries, preachers, prophets, manifest conferences, citywide programs like 40 Days of Prayer, Jesus Video Project, Neighborhood Knocking Doors, partnering with Southside Mission. He started NLCA because of the burden that he had for the young people. He started Purpose Institute. He threw us into teaching and Purpose Institute. And he believed in us more than we believed in ourselves. And he was always pushing, encouraging. And because he believed in us, we just tried it, you know. And most things worked out okay. But he stretched us. He poured into us. And he kept us busy. Maybe that was to keep us out of trouble, but I remember being asked to teach in a Sunday school class, and I didn't have kids, and I was young 20s, and I wasn't crazy about it, but I did it because he asked me to. Then Brother Merrick's class, the teenagers, that was a riot. And then Brother Lloyd's bus route, I don't know how we got on that for sure. I don't know if you asked us or he did, but. And then how did I learn to pray for people in the altar? He would say, would you go pray for so-and-so? So he was always making us, sicking us on other people. And teaching Bible studies, a visitor would come and he'd say, Sister Kit, would you teach her a Bible study? So I did not want to let him down. I let him down enough naturally, but I didn't want to let him down when he asked me specifically. And so I remember having to rotate clean the church because of necessity. I remember peanut brittle routes. And I was even the ladies' auxiliary president for a year. I don't know if it didn't work out or he wanted me to do something else. I remember the leadership meetings, and I remember Brother Robbie Staten, when you were the first meeting that he went to, like everybody else, he was nervous, like, what am I belong here for? You know, what am I doing here? And that's just the way he was. The first care group, I know Vic and I had, if not the first, one of the first care groups, and then we turned it over to Matt and Kayla, and they just walked the other way. He just, you know, Bishop cast us into ministries, into activities. And I remember Jim Grant. Whenever you asked Jim Grant to be the song leader, he was so nervous. As every new song leader was, he was so nervous he could hardly even sing, and everybody felt sorry for him. But after a month or two, he was like, wonderful. And so, Bishop, you developed people even when they didn't want to be developed. I remember some fun times like that water fight we had at my house, tracking through the house with the buckets of water, and I had him in my sights. He had not gotten wet, and I was going to try to get him wet, and then Sherry Kinney goes and falls off of the patio, which is the funniest thing. That's another story. And he yells, stop, and everybody freezes, and it took just long enough for her to get up and run away, and he ran away. So he was the only person at the whole water fight that was barely wet. And then the nature lover, the time that we went to that lake, we called it a lake. It was more like a farm pond, and it rained all week. And then we found that great big lake just a few minutes away from there. And he was always taking Vic on errands. And this one time at our house, we had a barbecue, and Vic was doing pork chops. I'm in the house doing food, potatoes, and people were coming in. I was making arrangements, and he said, Vic, go with me, always running an errand. And so Vic said, Kit, watch the grill for me. It's like, what? I'm in here, I'm doing potato salad. I got people, I don't even grill. And it's like, okay, well, I forgot. And so when Vic and Bishop got back, everything was burned. And I remember Jim Grant saying, oh, I can eat burned pork chops. And so he had one on a plate, put his fork through it, it turned to powder. So, and that's when Bishop and Vic were at the campground when you were stung by 100 bees. And I got to participate in that miracle, got to see that miracle firsthand. And he can cook. He doesn't let you know he can cook, but he can cook. I remember when Mother Lashley was in the hospital, I think, having edema. And here we are, this young 20-somethings, and we're over at the house with him and the kids, and he pulls out this whole chicken, and he says, Sister Kit, can you cook this up? It's like I was willing, but I looked at that chicken, and I had never bought a whole chicken before. I had never cooked a whole chicken before. And so I'm in the kitchen panicking, and I said, Vic, I don't know how to do this. Well, Vic didn't know either. And so he had to go to Bishop and say, we don't know how to cook this. We don't know how to cut this. We don't know what to do with a whole chicken. And so he took it back, and he cooked it. He fixed supper, and Vic and I went home. Thank you so much for memories, fun, serious, stretching us, throwing us into ministry when we knew we weren't qualified at that point. And it's just been a wonderful life. Thank you.
The fact that Dad could cook was probably one of the biggest secrets that was in our household. I didn't even know it, Brother Grant, till after I was 17 years old. Mom was gone to a ladies' conference or something. It was after the house had burned and we'd built a new home. That's how I know my age at the time. And I remember standing there. I was the only one home with Dad, and I thought we was going to go out to eat, and I was really looking forward to that. And Dad starts whooping up dinner right around the island, and I was like, Dad, I didn't know you knew how to cook. He said, and you better not tell your mother either. Oh, my. Recently, I'm just going to sprinkle some stuff, if you're all right with it, in between a few of the testimonies. Recently, I received one of the greatest compliments, I think, of my life. We were over at Sister Murnick's for a birthday party of somebody else, and Sister Flowers was there just recently after her recovery, and Sister Peggy Smith. And Sister Peggy Smith made the comment, she said, I was praying in the altar the other day, and you came and laid your hands on me, and she said, I didn't know if it was Bishop or you until I opened my eyes. And that was one of the greatest compliments. Funny story to tag on to that. When I was just a kid again at home, about 17 years old, people would call the house all the time with pastoral needs and issues, and I'd answer the phone, and before I could tell them who I was, they'd start telling me their problems. So after a while, I'd just listen to the problem, give a little bit of biblical counsel, and hang up and then tell Dad what was going on. None of you. It was other people, none of you. If it was you, it must have been good counsel because you're still here. Next, Elder and Sister Staten are going to share testimony.
Sister Staten, you go first.
Well,
Bishop has been a part of my life as long as I can remember. My parents attended the church when it was located on Lincoln and Blaine. And I remember loving Bishop and Mother Lashley just because they did. They respected him, and they just taught us children to. But as I grew older and I sat under his ministry and observed his life for myself, I learned to love and respect you, Bishop, because of who you are. And I think of two words when I think of you. I think of foundation and truth. And I'm like, because when you fill that pulpit, you speak the word. You don't just get a thought and go to the word and kind of find a scripture to support your thought, but you get into the word and you develop it. And so when we're listening to you, we know we're being fed. We know we're receiving truth. And I've thought of all the many messages I'm sure you've taught across the pulpit and everywhere, but I thought more than just teaching by your words that you've spoken, I think you've taught by the life you've lived. You have backed the word with the life that you've lived, and that's given us a solid foundation of truth and we can stand on, and it's a rock just because of you. And so I can't thank you enough for this gift, because I think it'll last us all that have sat on your ministry forever. And I just say thank you. I love you. You're wonderful, and I thank you for your commitment.
Well, I'll finish the last 5 minutes. Bishop, I was thinking today, I didn't want to spend too much time on it because I'm sure if you spend a lot of time and you've been around him, there's a lot we could all say. We'd be here past the cake and ice cream. But it's been almost, 32 years next month that I received the Holy Ghost right up there. And I thought about it. I had the privilege to sit under your ministry for about 16 years until your son, eldest, took over. And I've had the privilege to be there for 16 years of that. That's a testament to the kingdom of God and a testament to you and Mother Lashley's walk with God to receive as such. And I was thinking, you taught me to grow. The word that you would speak and the word that was shared every time that you filled the pulpit. But as I was thinking, even more than growing, Bishop, you taught me how to get up from failure. You taught me that I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to be indifferent. I'm going to maybe do or say something that is not maybe what God would have me to do. But you taught me, you encouraged me, you shared with me the opportunity to grow from that through the love of God. And I say thank you for that. I was also reading today, you probably wouldn't be sitting there if it wasn't for Mother Lashley sitting beside you. I was reading Proverbs 18 and 22 today. It says, whoso findeth a wife findeth a good thing. A good thing. And I can testify, and I'm sure you can yourself. I have found a good thing. Mother Lashley, let me say thank you. You don't even realize it, but I came to the Lord a couple years after my mom passed. And I've always looked to you. I've always, from afar, maybe not as close a relationship as maybe even I would have wanted. But I've always looked at how you've loved God, how you've handled yourself. And it's a testament as such to both of you guys. The lives that you have lived, I made it a point to say, God, I am thankful for Bishop and Mother Lashley for what you have done. And there's so many different ways to explain or maybe share. We all could come up with an idea. And Bishop, I went back to when I went into the Navy. This December will be 40 years ago I left for boot camp. And while in the Navy, I got a chance to do some quartermaster work. And what I would do there, I'd get an opportunity. We would be headed out in the middle of the ocean, and we would plot courses, and therefore we would head to our destination. And when you're out in the middle of the ocean, we had what was called satellite navigation. And that's 40-some years ago. The government truly does get the stuff about 20 years before you and I get it. But in return, the individual that was training me, he said when we were out in the middle of the ocean, we could use satellite navigation. But when we got to the time when we were headed into port, we were getting into some really severe situations, and we were getting into a place that we had to constantly take a fix of where we were at. He said, you need to find two places that are fixtures, unmovable. And I thought about that as I was traveling through life. I have the Word of God, and I have your relationship and to watch what you do in the presence of God. I've always been able to learn. I find out what the Word says and what your life represents. I can plot that course there, and that's where I'm at. And I want to say thank you for that.
If you're here tonight and maybe you haven't known Bishop for too many years and you hear all this praise and adoration, lest you think that he's perfect, I'll assure you that he's not. I grew up in his home, but for probably most of my childhood, I believed that he was perfect. He was that consummate man of God. I can say that he was definitely a man of integrity. What he lived in the pulpit, preached in the pulpit, he preached in the house. One example, I can remember growing up, and this tell you how far back, for those of you who don't know, we used to not believe in TV, not no kind, no how. When you went to the hotel with James Lashley, you didn't even turn the TV on. I thought you might get struck dead. I remember the first time I did it when he wasn't around, I used an inanimate object that would not conduct electricity to turn the switch. I had the fear of God instilled in me. But I wanted to share with you this. Again, it was around the time I was 17. Actually, it was prior to the house, so it was probably 15. I was in a tough patch in life, and I learned one of the greatest lessons of my life from my father, and that's how to respond when you are wrong. He had allowed some things in our home for a little while that was totally out of character for him. As a wayward teenager, I was loving it. But I knew something was up, and it didn't take long for Dad to realize this ain't right. And I remember him sitting our entire family down and saying, I failed you and I failed God. I'm asking you to forgive me. I was wrong, but it won't happen again. And he didn't try to smooth it over, make excuses. He owned it. And that was a lesson to me moving forward. I still had just as much, I had more admiration for him because I knew if he was willing to do that, then he was an honest and true man that was truly after the heart of God. And so he's not perfect, but he does have a heart that's perfect toward God. I can guarantee you that. Brother Mike Duhan.
Got to pull my notes up, Bishop. Usually it's technology that fells people. Today it was paper that felled me, so I had to go to this thing. Bishop, I have a bunch of thoughts here that I'm just going to read through because there is so much. Bishop, my father in the gospel, and so much more. One of my many pastors that I've had. I've been here for 36 of my 46 years. My impressionable years, my early impressionable years, I grew up in Louisiana, California, and I had the opportunity to meet some pretty awesome men and women of God. Brother Barnes, Brother T.F. Tenney, Brother J.T. Pugh, Brother Kilgore, Brother Treese, Brother Morton Bustard, Brother Billy Cole, Sister Vesta Mangan, Sister Mickey Mangan was my choir teacher in youth camp, and many, 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 many others before the age of 10. Every time my father had an opportunity to introduce me to one of those men of God, I got to meet those men and talk to them or hi or got prayed over, got invited to ride with Brother Tenney on his golf court. And then we moved up to Illinois. One of my childhood favorite preachers, and I never thought there would be anybody else like him, was Brother Bear, Brother Robert Bear. And he was called the Walking Word. And when we moved to Illinois, things changed. Things were totally different. And then Bishop became my pastor eventually, and I met the other Walking Word. And so in my youth, from 1985 was my first memory of the Lashley family. It was right after I'd received the Holy Ghost in youth camp down in Louisiana. And I remember it was winter time. I don't know if you guys came down for because of the times or what it was, but I remember we were playing church in one of the church buildings down there, and Adina come walking in with cups of snow. And maybe she's the reason, you guys are the reason why I love snow so much. But I'll never forget that, and that's the first time I met the Lashley family, was them visiting downstairs. She brought snow in cups, put it in the freezer in the RV, and bring it all the way to Louisiana, and I got to see snow. So that's a memory, early memory that I have. I remember the fire. I remember the first time I ever used a jackhammer was busting up your foundation after the fire. I also remember going over, this is a memory that I would have never had without that fire, was going over to Brother Bill Wood's house and having fried bologna sandwiches for the first time. He made the best fried bologna sandwiches. I remember puking in your old van. And I think it was the first time I got drunk, to be truthful. It was, I don't know, I think it was fermented punch from Brother John and Sister Carrie Lashley's wedding that we ended up drinking, and we did the paper out for Sister Carol Kramer early in the morning, and we drank like a whole gallon of that. And then we're stopping and going, and puked all over the van. Brother Lashley had to take the van to the car wash and use the power washer, and I think that van ended up, it never lost its smell, and ended up going to a missionary to Mexico, is my understanding of it. But Bishop still loved me after puking in his van. I remember sleeping on your couch at your house many times as a young man. I remember Dad introducing you to computers, and always going over to your house to try to fix a problem. Me and Pastor were just talking. We've never met a guy that can crash a computer as much as Bishop can. I remember as a young man being asked by you, one of the high privileges out of all the experiences I had as a minister, getting to know Bishop and him becoming my pastor and a solid foundation. Being asked by Bishop, he was presbyter at the time of our section back then, and he would ask me often to ride with him. If he was asked to preach at other churches, he would say, Mike, I want you to come along with me and ride. And I'll never forget those trips. One specifically was to Galesburg and going out and having dinner with you after the service. It was just a high honor to be with my pastor. And I don't remember everything we talked about on that trip, but I remembered one thing. I think we used somebody's car. I don't think it was it may have been Adina's car, and it had a radar detector in there. And I learned my bishop, my pastor, taught me how to use a radar detector on the interstate. He told me what beeps were good and what beeps were not, and when to slow down and when you could speed up. Just a fond memory there. I'll never forget, Brother Lashley, I remember you talking about the TV. I'll never forget a youth trip to Branson, Missouri. And me and the youth boys were in our room, and we're like, no youth leaders are in here. Bishop's not around, even though he was with us on the trip. We're going to watch some TV. And so we put on the TV, and we started watching that, and we were acting like kids, doing stupid stuff. And Bishop barged through the door. I thought we were all going straight to hell. And I remember Bishop looking at the TV, and he said, Gunsmoke? Oh, that's a childhood show of mine. He plopped down on the bed with us and started watching it with us. I'm like, oh man, I can't even believe this is happening. And I remember the flack that he got from some of the parents whenever he come back home. He ended up standing in the pulpit on a Sunday after that trip and said, yes, I did watch TV with the boys in their room, but then obviously apologized and stuff for that. But that was something that I got to see a guy that we held at high honor as a man of God be a real man too, and just connect with us in a way. And that's something that us boys that were on that trip, that's something we still talk about to this day, that yeah, we respect Bishop and everything, but that was just a neat memory, something that we have together. That tons of childhood memories, but probably the most important things that you've done has been since I've been married and since I've become a father. You have adopted me as a son in the gospel, my wife as a daughter, and my sons when it seemed like nobody else would give us time or day, our attention, or when it felt like everybody else gave up. Bishop was always still there and always saw something. You taught me and you taught us as young ministers that the three things that we take to minister is an anointing, a message, and our character. And those are the most important things, and that's things that stick with me. You taught me that principle is most important, the principle of the Word of God. You became an accountability partner for my wife and I. I remember when we first came into church, you guys all knew me. You knew how awesome I was. But y'all didn't know my wife, and you didn't know the hell that I put her through before coming to church, and some of the baggage that she carried with her into the church was the baggage I put on her. And I gave my wife permission, recognizing that, learning to humble myself, because Bishop taught us how to do that. And whenever we're wrong, like Brother Lashley said, we admit that and we move on. But Bishop was one of those accountability persons that I gave my wife, and I said, babe, if I ever bust ignorant, and you can't get through to me, you can't talk to me, you have permission to call our upper leadership, and Bishop was one of those. And there's been many a times where she called. I did some stupid stuff, said some stupid things, and next thing I know, if you don't know my phone, when Bishop calls me, it's an old Indian war cry. And when that war cry goes on, if I've been in a heated argument with my wife, I know I'm in trouble, and I got some repenting or explaining to do. I learned a lot of things from you, Bishop, in the garden, out there in the garden with you. A lot about gardening, but a lot about life. A lot about being a man, a lot about being a husband. We've had some interesting conversations in your basement. Some things I won't share. It's between us and God, and that's all. But memories and conversations that I'll cherish for the rest of my life, and they've made me who I am today. I remember growing up, Sister Murnick alluded to Bishop having a little bit of fun when you guys were younger, but whenever we grew up, fun was frivolous, unnecessary nonsense. And that's what Bishop taught us. There's no time or room for fun. And I remember one time out in the garden, I'd got out of the pond, it was a mess, and I asked Bishop to hose me off with the hose, and my wife was there. And I'm convinced that I was one of Bishop's favorites until he met my wife, and then my wife became one of his favorites, and then I was kind of second class after that. But I remember, and I think he might have just been showing off in front of my wife, but he took that garden hose and soaked me down, sprayed, laughed, had a blast. It was funny. I'm like, I can't even believe my Bishop's doing this to me. He taught us that sin will keep you longer than you ever planned on taking. It will take you further than you ever planned on going, and it'll cost you more than you ever planned on paying. He also taught me, Mike, if Bible, God, this life we live was not, if we find out in the end that none of this is true and it's just a great piece of poetry and just it's still not a bad life. Although we know the truth, and Bishop has been sure to teach us that truth. He taught me what it means to be bound by a covenant. There was times that I busted ignorant in my relationship with my wife. I didn't want to go on anymore. I wanted a divorce. And I had everybody else convinced around me it was time for a divorce. But at the last meeting that I was asked to have after I took my ring off was to go talk to Bishop. And Bishop taught me that love is not a feeling, it's a commitment, it's a God covenant. And whenever everybody else and we gave up on our own marriage, Bishop still saw something. And after I spilled all my beans, he would look at me just like Pastor would look at me whenever I felt I was in the right and everybody else was in the wrong, he would say, "Are you finished, Mike? Put your ring back on, go home and love your wife." And that's what I did. And we're still here. He taught me the contentment of an old rooster versus the desire of a young chicken. He taught us B plus O equals SF. Believing plus obedience. Bishop taught us the word, but the word fact is not good if we don't obey it. And if we have the word which he taught us and we obey that word, whether we believe it or not, or want to submit to it or not, that's saving faith. That's what saves us. Bishop taught me submission. There were several times he would say something. I didn't like what he had to say, and I didn't want to do what he told me to do. But I understood authority, and I understood submission. And every time, it proved correct. There was one time we were scheduled to go on a family vacation. Bishop called me up 2 days before we were set to leave. Bishop said, "I'm not your pastor. I'm your bishop. But I don't feel it's the will of God for you to leave on this vacation." And I said, "Bishop, enough said. You spoke with the voice of God. We canceled the vacation last minute." He also taught us that it may preach good, but it'll practice a whole lot better. I seen Bishop transition from a very authoritative, young, physically strong pastor, to our wise old bishop. And I say old with the utmost respect. With an abundance of grace and mercy. Bishop, I know the older you get, sometimes you feel like you're falling apart and you don't feel you can do as much as you used to or remember as quickly as you used to. But your worst days now are still better than most ministers' best days. You are a walking Bible. You were a word preacher, and you still are. You've taught us that authority is, does not have volume. It's truth. Authority is truth. And I get to share that a lot with a lot of our officers in the area. They ask, "How do you do things?" I said, "It's things that I learned in Sunday school. It's things that I learned through my bishop, that we have facts, we have principles, we have rules, we stick to that. We don't need volume. We don't need drama. It is what it is." And I learned that from my bishop. I get compliments. We were sitting at a camp meeting last year, and I had another minister come up to me and another group from our church into the fellowship hall, and he said, "Your bishop is amazing." And I said, "Tell me something I don't already know." He said, "He still commands an audience whenever he walks into a room." He said, "I watched your bishop this year walk into a room where they were voting on something, and the whole room, as if it were, stood at attention." That's my bishop. That's authority. That's the word of God that practices well. You may feel like you're falling apart and getting up there in age, but in my opinion, and I've heard it over and over and over and over again the last couple of weeks, I think one of the best messages, one of the most powerful messages that tops any conference message, any other message I've ever heard, was Cascading Grace. You still got it, Bishop. I love you. Thank you for everything.
This time we're just going to take a little picture video. I think it's about 4 minutes. So Mom, Dad, if you want to turn so that you can see that, give you a chance to breathe. And if you want to go ahead and roll that. Wow, what a lot of memories packed right in that little short. I'm not going to take a whole bunch of time. I want to go ahead and get to Brother Mike and Sister Aisha.
I had to write mine down. Okay, Bishop and Mother Lashley, we're so appreciative of you both. We loved spending time with you guys, and I remember the first time that we were going out for dinner. I know we were so nervous, sweating, and we're sitting at the table, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, we're sitting here with Bishop and Mother Lashley. What in the world are we going to talk about? And I believe that was the first time that I ever saw my husband be very quiet. So, but seriously, we just enjoy your company so much. And just listening to your stories of how God gave you the vision and burden for Peoria. Not only that, but you obeyed what God gave you. And you had that vision and passion for the Sunday school bus ministry, which others in the church body, they caught a hold of that vision as well. And if you didn't have that and the others didn't catch that, then I don't believe that I would be here now, because that's actually how I was introduced to Pentecost, off of the Sunday school bus ministry. So even now, you still have such a passion for this city and the lost. It didn't stay back in your 20s. It's followed you now even into your young 80. And when you preach, you can still feel that passion, and honestly, I think it's even greater, and it just overflows out of you. You're really an example of Jesus. When I went astray, you welcomed me back home. You love truth. You love others. You and Mother Lashley, you still have so much to offer. And we love you both so much, and we're grateful for your leadership, and happy birthday.
I echo a lot of what my wife said. I mean, what can I say when you're around the bishop? He's the bishop. You know, I remember when I first came into the church, I didn't have a foundation of the Bible, didn't know anything, and people would tell me stories about the bishop. He's a walking Bible. He's got everything memorized. And literally, there were times I was scared to even have a conversation with Bishop, because I can't even memorize Jesus wept. And here's a man that has the whole scripture memorized. It made me nervous, but he loved us regardless of what we did. He was always there. I thank you for everything that you've done. As I read the scriptures now, I put you in the category of Enoch and Elijah as the ones that actually walked with God. It's just the lifestyle that you've lived, that you've led, that allows me to put you in that category. And it's a respect, and it's an awe, and it's an honor that I get to call you my bishop. You're not just bishop, you're my bishop. It's personalized. And I had, I don't know, several years, it was a lot of immaturity on my part, you know, to fail to have a relationship deeper than what we've had. And I've talked to the Lord about it, repented of it, because as he's getting older and I've gotten more wiser, mature, whatever you want to call it, got out of my immature stage, it's more of, I just want to sit and listen to the bishop. It doesn't matter. I don't have to speak anything. Bishop can tell the same story 25 times, and I'm just like, say it 26. You know, I'm praying selfishly that the Lord will give you many more birthdays that we can share. I do have one funny, and then I'll just be done. It's just, it cracks me up every time I think about it at times. I've shared it a couple times. There was several years back, I can't even remember how long ago, he was having some roof work done, And I got off work, and I was able to come over and help out for a couple hours. And up on the roof, I can't remember who all was there, but there were several of us guys. And I think there were a few moments we were just cutting up there, having a good time. And then all of a sudden, I'm just down doing whatever I'm doing, and I hear the bishop come up. And it's kind of like everybody straightens up. It's like, it's the bishop. You don't say anything. You know, you kind of, yes, sir, here we go. I'm hammering this nail in right here, doing whatever I got to do. And I wasn't even looking. And Bishop just starts walking around and he's talking. And I'm telling you what, it had me nervous because he's sitting there talking about Mary and Jesus. And I'm looking over and he's kind of walking on this side over here. And I'm sitting there going, who in the world is he talking to? Like, he's on a different playing level. He's talking to Mary and he's talking about Jesus. And I'm sitting there like, I need to get off this roof before I turn into like Nadab and Abihu and just, I'm burning unfriendly fire over here because this is like holy ground. And then he turns around and I see he's got a Bluetooth speaker in his ear. And he's actually talking to, I believe it was his sister. And I'm like, oh, thank the Lord I can stay up here for a little bit longer. But the reason that I can believe that is because of the lifestyle and the what he's done living as a true man of God, representing the word, walking it, living it, breathing it. And it's just an awe and an honor and a respect that I have for you, Bishop. I love you. I thank you for your lifestyle, everything that you've done. It's been an honor again to say that you're my bishop. Thank you.
Many have alluded to Bishop being a walking Bible. Years ago, there was no such thing as Google, no such thing as a quick entry commentaries and all these things. And it was such a privilege living in a home with him. I didn't even have to know the scripture. I'd just tell something close to it, and he could tell you book, chapter, and verse, exactly where to find it. Sometimes these days it's really a point of frustration. We probably shouldn't be talking about it because that's a point of frustration because the old mind doesn't work like it used to. But, Dad, you put enough in all of us that it's living beyond you. Sister Carol Kramer.
Bishop, I appreciate you and Mother Lashley very much. It's been over 50 years since I came. I was a young teenager, 12, 13. My parents didn't come here. The Samses moved across the street from us. I became their babysitter. They introduced me to you folks. When I came in here, this was concrete floor. There was no carpet, folding chairs. And the Skibba girls were over at the Samses that day and had asked me to come over or come to visit. Mainly because there was a young evangelist they wanted me to meet. You know, young teenage girls, okay? Anyway, I got to come. My parents didn't attend church, but for some reason, after I started coming, they started going to another church. And in order to come here, I had to go with them on Sunday mornings. So thankfully, we had service Sunday night, Tuesday, and Thursday. I was given a curfew. Most of the time, I made it home by that time. But I know if it wasn't for your love and your concern, I wouldn't be here today. I came to you about going to meet somebody, and you told me no. Well, did I cry? Yes, I cried. I was told no. But it was the best thing that ever happened. I have a great husband. I've got beautiful kids and beautiful grandchildren. And if I wouldn't have listened to you, who knows where I would have been today. I was young, and we were having a great service, and I wanted to be baptized. But because of my age, I needed to get my parents' permission. You came to our house and asked my dad. My dad was not kind. So you took it upon yourself, because of the love that you have. And you went to the pastor of the church that my family attended, and you asked him, and I wasn't allowed to be baptized in Jesus' name there. But God kept his hand upon me, and the day came where I was finally able to be baptized in Jesus' name. But I know it's because of the love and concern that you folks kept, and you kept praying for us. My dad did come and apologize to you later for how his attitude was to you, but still, if it wasn't for your love and your concern for us and for me, still to this day, I'm the only one in my family. I did have a sister years ago that came and was filled with the Holy Ghost and baptized. She's gone now. But I still have 3 siblings left that I would love to see God bring in here, along with their children and grandchildren. And I know it's possible because you didn't give up on me. Neither one of you did. And you've always been there. I've always looked up to you. You've shown each other love. You show people love. I've gone to a few houses that you did Bible studies in and was introduced to turtle, I believe, at one of the houses. So I got to sample a little bit of turtle. But you always have patience with people. You've always got love. It just glows. Yeah, you might be a little timid to go talk to him once in a while. He's not going to bite you, I promise. He never bit me. Was I a perfect teenager? No. Am I a perfect adult? No. But I do appreciate everything you've done. I love you very much, both of you.
This time, Brother Grant's going to come and wrap this up, and then I got something I think you'll really enjoy.
If you need to stretch for a minute, you're welcome to. I know you've been sitting. It's been different. I'm not getting here because I'm going to preach very long. Even though you deserve it, I listen to all of your messages, all of my life. Something Sister Kramer just said really did touch me, because you can tell the character of a person by how they're treated. Brother Duhan talked about the respect, and I'm going to mention the respect that Bishop has earned. Not been given, he has earned. But it isn't the respect that he's given that shows you're a great man. It's how you treat other people. He doesn't go around making you feel inferior because he's a great man. He makes you feel like you're a great man, Brother Brayman. That is the mark of a great person. Not because he's great, because he makes you feel great. That's God's love in you. I'm not good at speaking from memory. He's fantastic at it, and I talk to him all the time. And your memory has come back fantastically. My wife and I was talking about that. You're preaching sermons, and out of recall, you're bringing scriptures. God's still doing the work there. But I'm so thankful to be a part of the testimony service. Bishop and Mother's fingerprints are all over this congregation, over my life. One of the first stories I remember from my childhood was as a baby, having a high fever, mom and dad panicking. They had already put me in ice baths, talked to the hospital, couldn't think of anything else. Called Bishop. Bishop came over, and by the time he left, my fever was back down to normal. I grew up knowing a miracle happened right there in my, in my bathtub. We've shared this church family and this church facility for the 50 years that I've been alive, and I can truly say this couple has demonstrated God's love and the faith of the apostles, the same faith for all of those years. Looking back at some other wonderful pictures I have at home, provides a lifetime of context for a couple that have been used by God to touch so many. And if we were to label the years of Bishop's life in sections, like the chapters of a book, and if you assume like I that Bishop is going to live to be at least 100 years old, we could equally divide his life into 25-year segments. Years 1 through 25 could be the spring of his life. Years 26 to 50 would be the summer, followed by 51 to 75, the fall. And now then he's entering into the winter of his life from 76 to 100. So let's glance back over the stages of Bishop's life that we know. In the spring, and I'm not going to touch on the childhood, I don't know that much about it, but from ages 0 to 25, 1943 to 1967. Here was the enthusiasm and the energy of youth. becoming independent, beginning to understand God's calling and gifting, learning leadership skills. We see pictures of you guys as young evangelists ministering. Pictures of a young minister water skiing, fully dressed. I'm talking with pants and shirt on. You see pictures of it maybe later. Stories of a church on Lincoln and Blaine and prayer meetings that fed a need for a larger facility. That was in the spring. Then comes the summer of Bishop's life, ages 26 to 50, from 1968 to 1992. This is the prime of life in the physical. You figured out what works and what doesn't work. You're continuing to grow mentally and spiritually. These are some of your most productive years in the physical realm. This church facility was completed and dedicated in 1970. I was born in 1972, just a few years into the summer of your life, and grew up when you were in your prime. You still had the vigor of the Energizer Bunny with the growing wisdom of experience and a mind full of the truths of God's Word. And you seemed to believe that we all needed to hear all of those words every service. I remember as a child, we had some nice decorations up here around the pulpit. And sometimes Bishop would be preaching deep into the night. And I'm not going to state a time because I may be exaggerating, but it seemed like it was almost into the morning. I'd occasionally daydream about hiding an alarm clock in one of those plantings and setting it for the next service to go off at 9 p.m., letting him know, that's my curfew, Bishop. I can tell you I'm thankful he never quit preaching. Never quit reaching for the lost. Looking back over pictures of youth banquets as Bishop encouraged young people to find their purpose in God. Pictures of that Sunday school with you as working on a flannel graph. The summer of his life was when he envisioned and implemented a wonderful Sunday school program and bus ministry Sister Murnick mentioned. Those were the times of making and selling peanut brittle, probably to pay for the gas in that fleet of buses that was going. And I can't imagine how much mileage those got. Then if that wasn't enough, he began dreaming of and then founded New Life Christian Academy. I graduated from New Life Christian Academy right at the end of the summer of Bishop's life. And I can testify his bishop for NLCA has been an incalculable blessing to me. How can you put a price on the scars, on the hurt and the evil that you never experienced? But for the grace of God, there go I. I know there's many people who haven't been privileged to attend a Christian school, but I can tell you, to me, it has been such a huge blessing, and one of my biggest prayers is God continue to bless New Life Christian Academy. Then we come to the fall of Bishop's years, ages 51 to 75, 1993 to 2017. This is the age of full maturity, greater spiritual power, greater influence, and wise counsel as you recognize there's a new generation preparing to step into leadership. And Bishop had been active in the leadership of our organization since back in the summer of his life, and now then he was well known. Several of you have mentioned that. I'd see him on the stages of conventions, district camps, and even saw a picture of him visiting the White House as a delegate of the UPCI. I was always proud to point out, that's my bishop, as if that made me anything, but that's my bishop, so you know I've got to be coming from a good place. I remember Bishop bringing Brother French to help better organize and prepare our church for growth and harvest. And I remember growing up myself into ministry and being invited to retreats and planning sessions that Bishop would be hosting to help plan out next year's ministry. There's a wise saying that goes, there's no success without a successor. And it's meant to illustrate that no one lives forever. And if you don't prepare somebody to carry on after you, your vision is going to die with you. And it's a wise man who plans ahead and prayerfully envisions the future that God is leading and preparing them for. Well, I know it was God's purpose and God's timing that caused the passing of the pastoral torch from you to pastor. It was blessed by the fact that you had been spiritually planning and preparing for such a transition. And I was present for that transition in 2006. I've never had a moment's doubt that either bishop or pastor were exactly in God's will. I can't imagine a more smooth and more anointed change, one that expressly illustrated the hand and the purpose of God was being implemented, and we've enjoyed that. It was a God thing, and it was amazing to watch history being made right here in this sanctuary. And while in the fall of his life and following close after God, Bishop and Mother Lashley temporarily moved to Greenville, Mississippi to revive the church there. Then in 2008, they moved all the way to California to serve in ministry at the Bible College in Stockton. Their lives have always been examples of following wherever God leads, whatever God directs. Bishop was just telling a story the other night, explaining how some of that happened. Hearing from God just so clearly and following through on wherever God directed him. Just a beautiful example. Eventually, and in the timing of God, they returned to Peoria to fulfill that important role of bishop that they still serve in for this local congregation. And now we come to the winter of their lives, age 76 to 100. 2018, Bishop, to 2043. You have a ways to go. This age is characterized by investing into others, mentoring others who look up to you as a spiritual leader, leading other leaders. You have the flexibility to easily minister wherever God leads you. You can minister still to the youth in talking to them. Everybody who's talked, it kind of covers the gamut of ages. Haven't heard as much from our youth tonight, but they hear that too. They still hear you connecting with them, being able to easily flow wherever, because it's the love of God that's running all of this. And as the pastoral and leadership team began planning for our current building for the Promise Giving program, it was Bishop who encouraged us with mighty testimonies of God's provision in this very building. If you haven't heard some of that, you need to ask him about it. It'll encourage your faith. Bishop and Mother Lashley have wonderful, powerful, fulfilling lives that they've led. Yet they continue to minister to others, building faith, sharing wisdom, mentoring younger ministers, and allowing the love of God to flow from them to whomever they touch. They're not just Christians. These are ambassadors of Jesus Christ. Jennifer and I were talking about a particular church service in the fall of Bishop's life, and I'm closing, when our oldest son was just a small little boy. And Bishop must have been preaching a long service because Nicholas was drawing during that service. After church, Jennifer looked at some of the drawings he had made, and one of them was a pulpit, and there was a stick figure behind it, Brother Ray. And Jennifer asked him, "Who is that?" Thinking he was going to say, "It's Pastor." And he said, "That is Jesus." Well, Nicholas is now 25 years old with a wonderful wife. I think one of the best children ever, another on the way. But I can still tell you that if I had to point him to somebody who represents Jesus, I couldn't point him to anybody better than you two wonderful people. Wonderful examples of Jesus Christ. Thank you for a life well lived. You've blessed thousands of people over a lifetime of ministry. One day you're going to receive your heavenly reward, but today we thank you, honor you on your birthday, thanking you for showing us Jesus. Thanking you for demonstrating how to live life more abundantly. Thank you for showing us what a godly marriage and a godly home looks like. And thank you most of all for showing and sharing God's love with us. We love you. Wish you a happy birthday.
You may be seated. I'm not going to take much more time. In fact, I'm going to cut some stuff that I had planned. The time has really slipped away. But I want to do something before we go to refreshments. In a card I wrote to my father, I made this statement that it's been said that a legacy is not measured by what you accomplish, but rather by what others accomplish because of you. And only heaven will reveal the lives that have been altered for the better and destinies that have been changed for eternity because of his passion for the Lord and love for others, which has been testified here tonight. And in closing of that card, I made a statement. You've probably heard the story before if you've been around here for any length of time. I said, "Now I know you, Dad, and I know that you would deflect all the glory to God, and he's definitely worthy. However, it reminds me of a story I heard about a gardener who tended a garden. And a passerby said, 'My, that is a beautiful garden. Look what you and the Lord have done with that garden.' To which the gardener said, 'Yeah, you should have seen it last year when the Lord had it all by himself.'" Powerful truth. Humorous, but a very powerful truth. We are laborers together with God. It was Ray Boltz who sang the song many years ago, "Thank you for giving to the Lord. I am a life that was changed." So in closing tonight, I wonder if we could do something. If you are here tonight and you, your family, your children are here either directly or indirectly because of Bishop's ministry, that would include coming in under pastor's ministry, because were it not for Bishop, we wouldn't be here. So if that includes you, would you stand to your feet in this room tonight? Wow. Thank you, Bishop. Thank you. Thank you. We are lives that was changed because of you. Would you just give the Lord a hand clap of praise? I'm grateful that I'm a part of that number. If you'll all stand with us, we'll say a word of prayer and we'll have some refreshments. You can fellowship with Bishop and Mother Lashley in the fellowship hall. Father, we're so grateful for your goodness. Thank you for the family of God. Thank you for the privilege of being a part of what you're doing in the earth today. Thank you for a man and a woman that would invest in our lives, God, so that we can invest in the lives of others and fulfill the call that you've placed upon each of us. Bless our time, our refreshments, our lives for your kingdom. We ask it in Jesus' name. And everyone said amen. God bless you. You're dismissed in Jesus' name. Please hang around and fellowship with us for a little while.